Okay. Hey guys, thanks for joining us. I will introduce Crawford in a minute. A few protocols for Q&A. You can type the questions in the uh, live session on LinkedIn and or on Twitter. I'll see those, and we will try to address most of those towards the end of the discussion. And yeah, looking forward to your questions and your participation, and even offline after our discussion. Um, Crawford, thanks for joining me. Um, think it was great to see you 3 times this year. IDC Directions, I think Google Cloud Next we met, and then IBM Think. And thanks for agreeing to joining this session. Folks, Crawford is one of the brightest minds in our industry. He has
You're very
30
sweet.
plus years of experience of analyzing our industry, actually, from IDC side. And his thought process is super clear. I just love it. He can summarize all these things into like few words and few sentences, um, not to make him feel more awkward, I guess. With that said, Crawford, you can introduce yourself and tell us like a couple of things about IDC, the grandiose or nature of your enterprise, and
Yeah,
then we'll get
absolutely.
into
Sure.
the
Hey,
agenda.
Sarabjit, it's my honor to be a part of your show and your event. I have been with IDC for over 30 years. I've been an analyst in the IT industry for over 30 years. Before that, I worked in financial services in New York, and joined IDC as an analyst and uh, ended up running all of our research, and then ultimately became our chief operating officer. And about 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, became the president of the company. We are a company that we have over 1,000 analysts in about 52 countries around the world. We are focused on really understanding the impact of technology on the world. Our mission every day is to, with our research and with our data and with our custom solutions and with our events, to really make our customers successful in their understanding of technology. And so we feel like operating around the world, because technology is unlike any other industry. I like to say this a lot. If you studied automobiles before Elon Musk, right, a car in 1875 and a car in 1995 or even 2005 was pretty much the same. It had tires, it had a transmission. In the 1980s, it got a digital clock. In the late 1980s, it got an LCD panel. But really, not a lot changed on an automobile until Elon Musk made it a software-enabled, network-connected device. Technology is unlike that. Technology has reinvented itself every decade that I've had the honor of watching it. And sometimes it reinvents itself or aspects of itself in 5 years or even 3 years. And as technology reinvents itself, we believe IDC is here to help our customers understand the impact of this technology on their business, and in some cases on consumers around the world. So it's been my absolute honor and privilege to be a part of this company and this journey. I've seen this company grow over 10x, um, since I've been a part of it, and it's just it's a wonderful group of people, and that's what we want to do every day in this incredibly unique industry.
Awesome. And maybe towards the end, we will talk about the changing nature of the analyst industry,
Sure.
and we can do that. But let's cover our main sort of topics. And to start with, how do you see the current sort of state of enterprise computing in particular, but computing in general? Actually, there's a lot of B2C entering the B2B sort of space as well. So how do you see that spend wise and the pace of change wise and any other aspects?
Yeah, we're at a super interesting time, I think, in the technology industry. It is kind of interesting in that consumer technology has really, the gravitational force of consumer technology has all really moved into the mobile phone. It's kind of interesting if you think back in your mind's eye to walking through a computer retailer, pick your retailer, whether it be Dixon's in the UK or whether it be MediaMarkt in Germany or whether it be Best Buy in the United States. the number of things that they're selling in those stores keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And they kind of trick you by bringing in maybe games for Xbox or something else. But the truth is that those industries have consolidated. I mean, trust me, you go back 10 years, there were not 2 aisles dedicated to headphones. Because there were a lot of other personal home connected devices. But a lot of these devices, the gravitational force has gone into apps and turned into apps and gone onto these 2 massive platforms, which are iOS and Android. And now we're seeing those platforms have now gained all the scale, and we're seeing innovation on top of those platforms. Now, when you think about enterprise tech is in a fascinating place, because enterprise tech, we've had sort of these multiple cycles that we've moved through. And, I like to talk about it a lot. If you go back about 15 years, you saw that the industry was really powered by these 4 forces. And if you go back, and really people don't realize it, but 2007 was just a really critical and seminal year. In that year, we saw all these things happen at the same time. Facebook went from an edu to a .com. We saw analytics go from sort of the large Teradata boxes down into something departments could use. We saw the emergence of this incredible product that Amazon brought out called EC2. And then we saw this other thing that was announced called the iPhone. Yeah. And those things all happened in really the span of about 15 months. And when those things all happened, the whole world changed. We saw this move toward this acceleration in innovation. And we saw this golden period, which was really between about 2012 to now, which was this period of multiplied innovation. We saw this rapid development of technology all for the cloud. And it was all built on the cloud, where you could have computing became much more elastic. The connectivity was ubiquitous. With first it was 2.5G, and then it was 3G, 4G, and now we're up to 5G networks. We've seen once we ended up getting that network in place with the cloud on top of it, the incremental cost of sending a bit across that network became basically zero. So now basically I could connect the world with my software in a very, very cost-effective way. And so we are seeing, and we believe that we saw between 1964 and 2015 about 500 million apps were developed. But we think between 2015 and 2027, we'll see another 500 million, at least, and that's conservative, apps be developed. So we're seeing this incredible innovation that's happening on top of the industry. So now you ask me, what's happening today? Well, what's happening today is we've got these cloud platforms are now at scale. They're entrenched, and people are innovating on top of them. And, in the United States, 3 of them roll off our tongue, right? Microsoft, Azure, AWS, and Google, actually 4, and OCI. And then, you get around the world, and there are others, right? There's Ali Cloud, that's now, very, very successful outside the United States. And then there are others that are in China. And so now these clouds become these innovation platforms. But now, if we're going to develop all these apps going forward, we have to do it in a more automated way. We have to be able to scale IT. So we believe that the industry is reinventing itself yet again as we move into this AI-enabled era. And we think that AI will change the world. It'll change how we think about developing software, how we think about porting software, how we think about work. All these innovations will allow us to gain tremendous amounts of scale built on top of this technology. And I promise you, we are just at the very, very beginning of this journey. But right now, we're in this journey where the cloud platforms are at scale, applications are, largely at scale, and now we're just beginning to explore what we can do. So with AI, and so what we can do with AI, right? We'll start with the horizontal use cases, and that's what you see with things like Gemini and things like Copilot. But I promise you, in the course of the next couple of years, you're going to see AI start to infuse all these vertical use cases and these industry use cases. And we'll start redefining work in all these industries. And I think the narrative will change a lot from, oh my God, we're not going to have jobs, that look at the productivity gains we will get from AI going forward.
Yeah, I think well said. We are just in the beginning phases of Gen AI in particular, but AI in general. And today, just to prove the point that we're live, just a few minutes ago, Apple announced their what they call it, private cloud compute. That
Mhm.
was very interesting, I thought. Like it sounded like a private cloud offering from AWS, but it's not. So what they're trying to say is that we will do most of the compute on your end user device, on, in this case, mostly mobile phone. They have championed that, right, that sort of segment. And then if there's a need to get more compute, then they will go to their servers first. In the first few sentences, they criticize the servers, like, hey, if something is on server, oh, somebody can take it away from you, and then somebody can steal that data. But then in the next sort of minute or so, they said our servers are better because they're private cloud
Well, so
compute.
so let's unpack that for a
Yeah,
little bit,
that's
right? If
that.
I were Apple, I would do the same thing, right? What has Apple got, right? Apple has a platform where it's a sandbox that they largely control. They've got they've got this installed base of billions of devices that are all able to access those apps. So look, for a long time, Apple has built the most incredible platform I've ever seen. But if you look and say, where's that one weakness in the chain? It's always been their lack of footprint in enterprise infrastructure, right? They just don't have that same same footprint. But what they do have are all these apps that they can largely dictate a lot of the functionality of, particularly the back end functionality. And so now they have an opportunity to give you a very, very excellent experience on device and in the cloud, in this private cloud, where they can basically start to enable next generation intelligent features. If it can't be done on the device, it'll be done in the cloud. I promise you that narrative will flip over the course of the next few years as they bring out more AI coprocessors to the devices. And that narrative will move to you'll be able to do it at the edge instantaneously, move the AI out to the point of decision. But right now, that's not kind of what they do. So they want to be able to use the network, be able to create that level of functionality within their private cloud. But once they get those devices out there, I'll guarantee you it'll move back to the edge.
Yeah, I think that they were forced to say that because yeah, even today they can do a lot more on device, but because they are going with OpenAI, the announcement of OpenAI to
Mhm.
use their sort of chat GPT 4.0 and next one 5.0 maybe, they had to say that we will be using the back end, the cloud
Well,
in
no,
this case.
I mean, I don't mean to disparage Apple or OpenAI in any way. They are doing that on the back end because that's where they're able to process that technology. But once they can bring
Yeah.
that OpenAI to the edge, why wouldn't you do that? You'll create an even better experience.
Yeah, I think that's basic,
Yeah,
one-on-one of the network computing. Like if you can do something locally, you don't want to create traffic for the network,
exactly.
right?
There's no reason to do that, right?
There's no reason to do that. Yes, definitely. Unless you want to steal the data, which nobody wants to
no,
admit
no, 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 no. They don't want to do that.
that. All right. So I think going into just touching upon that sort of the intermingling of B2B versus B2C, right?
Yeah,
I'm a B2B guy, so like I want to talk more about that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and then like, okay, Facebook is bringing these large language models into the picture, and then Microsoft via OpenAI is bringing the large language models to the enterprise, more to the enterprise than the sort of B2C use case for the masses, if
Right.
you will. Not for 4 billion people, not for 5 billion people, but maybe for 1 billion people. That's what I mean by that. So how do you see that, like the clash of the cultures and push and pull, open sourcing, the business models, like how Microsoft will make money from their AI initiatives versus now Facebook is putting these models out there, so called, like, it's not really open source. It's like only the weights are open source. So the whole push and pull of business models versus B2B versus B2C. How do you see that working out?
Yeah. So I think this is an incredibly interesting time, and I kind of think of it as like it's like a pyramid, where
Hmm.
at the very very top of the pyramid you've got these companies that have these very sophisticated, these hyperscalers that have these very very sophisticated models that they want to put out into the market and have large numbers of people benefit from. And those hyperscalers are doing that, and we're seeing that happening at Facebook, and you'll see some enterprises start to adopt that, but you'll also see, other entities start to use some of those models. And I think that those are going to be for the most demanding customers. Those are going to be for the customers that really need a ton of scale that a Facebook can bring. There's also the Microsoft model, which is that you want to be able to provide a horizontal level of functionality. And you want to build that on top of a set of applications that people are using every day for productivity. And this is really the same thing that a Google or a Microsoft are doing right now. And I think that, Microsoft is really, again, I give Satya so much credit because he was the one who saw that there was so much value, not in Windows, but, basically in the applications that are used on top of Windows, specifically Office, every single day. And so they've started by having those by providing an OpenAI powered Copilot on top of Office, which is really where the language of a lot of business is done. Google's doing the same thing with Gemini, and those will be great models that people will monetize over time. But kind of back to my pyramid, that's more down at the bottom of the pyramid and how enterprises are using. So if you think about the middle of that pyramid, the sort of second layer down, you've got the people that want to have their own models on their own systems. And here you get into the very sophisticated supercomputer, really, really large scale installations where you're going to see governments, you're going to see defense departments, you're going to see those kinds of people basically running their own proprietary models there. And they'll use open source models, and then they'll fortify those models, they'll harden those models for their own uses. And those will be sort of, you got a few hyperscalers on top that are making their models available. You've got this larger number of government entities. And then you get the bottom rung, which is the enterprises. And there you're going to have enterprises using a variety of models that they'll integrate. They'll bring in their own hybrid cloud installations. They'll build up their own systems. And there, you'll have a relatively large number of customers. You'll have hundreds of thousands of customers with many instances of LLMs that are both private or hybrid. So there'll be elements that are private in their data centers, and then they'll burst out to the cloud on an as needed basis, which will take them back to the hyperscalers. And we are just beginning to see enterprises on that journey. So, it was very, very interesting to see in HPE's results last week that only about 15 they only see about 15% of their deals for AI are enterprise customers. And remember, this is a company where 70% of their revenues are going through the channel, which is basically all enterprise customers. So they're going to see a big flip going forward as more and more enterprises adopt this technology, which is why I'm so bullish on IT on infrastructure demand for this year, because we're going to see so many of those enterprises move to AI and really have to upgrade and renovate their infrastructure in order to support AI, which is why, you look at, the dollar spent, infrastructure as a service, we expect that'll grow over 20% this year. You look at core infrastructure, not networking, but server and storage, that'll grow over 10% or at about 10%, just over 10%. And then, that we've never really seen a steady kind of growth for core infrastructure over, a period of a couple of years. Now, don't forget, last year, enterprise infrastructure, I think, grew at about half that rate. But we think enterprise infrastructure will be on a tear for at least the next couple of years as we upgrade that infrastructure, as those enterprises start to move to AI. So that's kind of how I think about it. I think about those models where at the very top, you've got a very few number of models serving customers, and those customers are super, super demanding. Then you get customers who are there's more of them, they're demanding as well. They're so demanding, they'll build their own. And then there's the enterprises that'll have hybrid, they'll have thousands of enterprises with hybrid installations, and there they'll use, you know, probably open source that they'll bring in. But they may use some proprietary models as well. But the reality is that's how we get broad-based adoption of AI.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, the great way to put it, into 3 tiers. I see that, like, only few will train the large language models, or the largest language models. They're very generic, you know, horizontal. But then the next tier can be industry-based models, like where
and they will be. They'll absolutely be industry-based, and you're going to see this is where the professional services companies are going to play a tremendous role.
The taxonomies. Like, I used to work in the B2B space during .com days. Like, there are a lot of taxonomies. You know, we had Rosetta Net, and then, you know, EDI. Then we brought in XCBL and all that stuff. You know, all these standards around international commerce, and they're well-defined documents, right? And then that can be put into the smaller language models. And in our world, actually, in the data center applications world, we have a CIM model, CIM, a common information model for doing ITIL, ITSM. So that can be put in a small sort of language model as well. So it will be amalgamation of so many models which are specific to certain domains. And then, as you said, then the enterprises will have their own data related models. And on that note, I see, I want to get your take on this. I see that there's a design time use of Gen AI, and then there's a runtime use of Gen AI. That's how I divide it. I'm a programmer at heart, so that's how I think: design time, runtime. So at design time, like, a lot of Gen AI is being used for code creation, code refactoring, and all that stuff, right? And even designing, even writing the, you know, specs. You know, you can use that Gen AI to write the specs and all that. Also write an email to build the business case for a new application, for example, right? But then during the ops, like, that's where we need the more accuracy, right? On the data center ops, definitely, but when it comes to business data, like, you don't want to miscalculate the sort of sales tax of a transaction in a city. You know, you don't want to do that, right? Because AI hallucinates right now. So I think the Gen AI will come a little later to the systems of record. Before that, it will come to the systems of engagement, where you need less accuracy.
Right.
How do you see that?
Yeah. So that's exactly right. But remember, there are some systems of engagement that are very, very, very important, right? And you know, I think I'm not sure the systems of record and systems of engagement are going to work as well in a Gen AI world. It's kind of, you know, where a human needs to oversee and be involved, versus where it's okay if Gen AI you know, gives a and again, you know, it's very, very difficult to not have humans overseeing most of this stuff today, because there's a reasonableness test that a human can bring to those aspects. But I think when you start getting into some of these, you know, industry use cases, you know, a hallucination that puts somebody else's face on my driver's license in an automated way at the Department of Motor Vehicles, that's just annoying. I mean, it's, you know, you get all the way to the line, all of a sudden they kind of matched you up and it's the wrong person. You're, okay, I got to go all the way back through this again. So, you know, you know, I think there's going to be a lot of those kinds of situations where we're still going to need humans to oversee these kinds of, and even in things like systems of record, and it's maybe even especially in systems of record. So, you know, we've done a lot of survey on this thing, and when you look at the barriers to adopting, you know, what we find is that, you know, it's not surprising that of the top four, you know, in the top four, the hallucinations that Gen AI isn't trustworthy enough, it consistently comes up, as do the security concerns that we see people bringing up, in that, you know, I can't run the risk of some data getting out of my organization, or some information being exposed to someone in my organization who shouldn't be seeing that in that level of information. What's also interesting is the other kind of areas that I find really fascinating that have come up as concerns are things like people don't feel their data is ready. They don't feel they've invested in their data. They don't feel they have their data structured in a way. And then also, and this is just a screaming opportunity, they can't find a partner who's versed in their industry and who understands their data that they want to work with. So these are all barriers that we see coming up, and I think we're going to continue to see these things coming up over time.
I think that's awesome way to put it. Two sort of points come out of what you just said. One is the application definition of application is evolving, right?
Yep.
I think it's evolution of software, if you will. What we're going through, it's not revolution. I mean, people think it's evolution, but I think it's evolution. Reason being, the same reason we just discussed. Like the Gen AI has hallucination problems. We're trying to fix that, but it's very super useful for productive, every day, writing
Right.
and writing emails and replying emails and writing even business use cases and also for coding as well, right? But when you're writing applications, applications are actually codification of laws of the land many times, right?
Yeah,
This
yeah.
much tax, you can't do this, you can't do that, who can do what, all that kind of stuff, right? So there are a lot of rules built into these applications. My understanding is that we will mix these things up. Like, so we still need a lot of programmers to write these applications, though it's our dream goal to get rid of programmers. Like Jensen says, oh, nobody needs to learn programming anymore. I think he's stretching a little bit too much, on that front. So that's one thing.
Well, I think that's absolutely a stretch, but we can come back to that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the idea that you won't need programmers is just, you're going to need programmers, but what you will get are programmers that could be 5 and 10 times more effective and more scalable with Gen AI. And I think that, in a similar way, the areas I'm most excited about when it comes to programming, in a similar way to the way that we're using Gen AI today for simple words. If I need to debug a part of a program, if I need to add a set of functionality to a specific segment that I'm working on, Gen AI can help me through that kind of thing. So that's going to mean that I'm going to be more effective as a programmer. I also think, and this is a really important, you get to a lot of these legacy applications, maybe on the mainframe, maybe that were used in client server applications, particularly the mainframe. Some programmers today don't exactly understand how that program works. they don't understand, so having Gen AI basically go through it and say, this is how the logic of that program, and having them learn and having them gain that experience, and then being able to take a first shot at porting that application to another platform, that's an incredible productivity boost, but it's not necessarily replacing people.
Yeah. Ian actually on LinkedIn, I think he's on X actually. He's on X, and Devraj, they are expressing the similar sort of point of view. What we are talking about, innovation is AI is and not instead of people. So
that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So actually, pivoting a little bit to this juicy topic of Nvidia hitting $3 trillion in market cap. I mean, like, you can't avoid that, right? And I mean, I have said a few things in the past, but like, I want to hear from you. How do you see Nvidia's moat? I've heard you saying that on Bloomberg recently as well, but I want to hear from you for our audience here, and then talk about that a little bit more around it. Like, what do you think is their moat and where they are going as compared to AMD, Intel, and other players in the space?
Sure. So I think the easiest way, the way I think about NVIDIA, and by the way, we can have the conversation about the edge, and we can have the conversation about the core, right? So let's talk about the core to start, right? So NVIDIA has been developing these GPUs for decades, right? And what people forget and what they don't realize is that there's so much development software around that GPU in order and also on x86 as well, that developers need to understand and need to work with if they're going to write software that's going to work on these platforms. And people don't realize that in the case of Nvidia, they developed their platform, a proprietary platform called CUDA, that they've made available to developers, and that has been adopted. It's been adopted in gaming. It's been adopted in HPC. It's been adopted in a lot of different areas. And now it was there and it was available, and developers knew it, and they started using it for Gen AI. And so now you've got this moat around Nvidia, because people think, well, it's just about going faster with the GPU. I would actually argue one of NVIDIA's toughest challenges going forward is going to be the GPU, because it consumes a ton of electricity. It's super, super hot. I mean, my God, I mean, looking at server announcements, I've never seen so many water-cooled systems, that are now coming out, or fluid-cooled systems, because you got to be able to cool these things down, because they are going to run super, super hot. And by the way, energy consumption is going to be a problem going forward that we're going to be struggling with. Now, having said that, what NVIDIA has done is they've got this CUDA platform that developers are writing to and then taking advantage of the GPUs. So you and I were involved in something that Dave Vellante put out around how, I think what he was positing, which was very interesting, was that, Cisco kind of had the picks and the shovels, and they were the miners of the internet era, right? Where they were the ones who enabled and by the way, I've had this conversation with a lot of different, executives over the years. They connected the world. I mean, why was Cisco the most valuable company on the planet for a while? It was because they were connecting the world and creating the internet. Well, do you compare NVIDIA to that, or do you compare NVIDIA to something else? And a lot of names came up, and one of the couple of names I threw into the mix is that they're more like two companies. They're more like Wintel. They're more like Microsoft and Intel together in one company. Now, why do I say that? I say that because if you think back, you have to put yourself in the time machine and think back to forget about 1998, 1999, when people started using the internet. Go all the way back to 1990, when people were using, Windows 386 and then Windows 3.0. It was a platform that allowed you to get massive productivity and software innovation on top of this thing called a personal computer, right? And then we went and we moved that to the server side, and we were able to do that on top of NT, and we were able to innovate on top of Windows NT in this new open environment. And so you brought together this powerful platform called Intel, you brought together this powerful software platform called Microsoft, and you got this innovation that blossomed. Then you bring in Cisco, you connect the world, and you've got the internet as we know it today. So what NVIDIA has done is they've brought this moat to the world, which is the CUDA platform combined with their GPU to have developers, and that's going to be very difficult to unseat. Not impossible, but very difficult. Why? Well, because this platform is something that people know. They're familiar with it. They're writing in it every day, and they're using it. What Intel wants to do, and what AMD intends to do, is they intend to bring out their products on with open source, and with open source software that people will be innovating on. As Clayton Christensen famously said, disruption takes a long time. And one of my favorite quotes is the Stanford Paul Safo from the Institute of the Future. And every time I go to Las Vegas, I think of this, and that is, don't confuse a clear view with a short distance. Okay, just because you can see the casino, I'll just walk there, and you keep walking, and you keep walking, and you keep walking. And this is a classic example of that, which is that in order to get people using that open source software, it takes a long time. And so I think that's going to be the big challenge that we see is not that the Intel platform won't work, not that the Intel platform is not going to be useful. It's that you got to get people to adopt it and start using these tools. And Intel is very clever, and they'll figure out ways to accelerate that. But that's the moat I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, spot on. The one point actually Jensen made in an interview with John Ford of CNBC was that all these GPUs they have put in last 15 plus years since the CUDA platform was put out there, right? CUDA
Yeah.
is a little younger than the GPUs, so you can train the same models with older GPUs as well. So the backward compatibility is the key. So when you have the
Well, that's another big part of it, right? Yeah.
yeah, when you have
Right.
backward compatibility, then developers will stick with it. Uh, um, take the opposite case, like if uh, Nvidia said like last year, hey, we have this new language, new APIs, and they don't work with older GPUs, and then that means you are almost the same at par with other guys like who are trying to push the
Well, that's right. And
open
you
source.
would and if you're going to break that compatibility, you got to have a crazy good reason to break that. I mean, like all caps, crazy good
Yeah.
reason to do that. Because think about it. I mean, just use a very simplistic example. How would you feel if a document that you wrote in Google Docs or in Microsoft Word 2 years ago, you couldn't open
Yes.
on Microsoft? I mean, you'd be infuriated. And that's just like a simple Mickey Mouse example. But I mean, this is what developers would need to deal with every day, right? So no, that is the backward compatibility is an amazing. But that's all part of the platform, and that's all part of the game. And by the way, this is right out of Microsoft's playbook.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, actually, I've listed quite a few topics because I know you're well versed in all these. I wanted to touch upon the posture from
Actually, you know
um,
what? Before we leave that, can we go to the client side for a second? Because there's a lot of conversation
oh
about
yeah, yeah,
how
AIPC.
so yeah, AIPCs, right? So let's just talk about that for a second, because here the narrative kind of flips, right? In my
Hmm.
opinion. So we are at IDC, we believe that by 2026, over 50% of PCs will be AI PCs, will be AI enabled. And so a very simple thought would be, well, those are all going to be Qualcomm AI PCs. Not so fast, right? So again, here you've got a situation where Intel is working on it's a multi-chip module that it's Lunar Lake that they'll bring out, and there you've got um, a, a a need to deliver. Really, it's nearly fanless design. In the case of Qualcomm, it is fanless design, and you've got to deliver really good performance. But you're doing it on your x86 platform, which means you're guaranteeing 100% compatibility, and you're also guaranteeing you're going to have a more advanced, a very advanced a graph, not its graphics capability for that PC, and that's important when you want to start doing relatively sophisticated graphics on in a laptop environment. So I think that one of the most interesting decisions we're going to see on the client side over the course of the next 2 years is not whether we get AI PCs on on the edge. We will get them on the edge because they're going to make a tremendous difference in the performance we have. It's how many CIOs are going to be willing to say, well, you know what? A high degree of compatibility is okay on all those Windows applications versus 100% guaranteed compatibility. And that's because of the benefits of the Wintel platform. And so if AMD and Intel can deliver that compatibility at the edge, I actually think they're going to be very difficult to unseat from a Qualcomm or other AMD based processor on the edge. And so
You mean
again,
ARM?
back
You
to the
mean
power of
ARM?
that platform.
Yeah, you meant to say ARM processors, right? Versus.
No. I'm saying. So x86 compatibility,
Mhm.
but running an NPU, if you will,
And
at the edge.
yeah, that makes sense. Actually, I think that's very important nuance there. Actually, that compatibility, the backward compatibility, is super important. If I can't run the applications I use every day with new AI PC, or they are running slower than
Yeah,
old
yeah, right. So it's kind of
PC.
a tough balance, right? So Intel's game here is how do I deliver you a great AI PC experience, but give you that 100% compatibility?
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. And coming back to regulators, right? And
Yep.
our FTC, Lena Khan, is very tight, and so are the European regulators, and Chinese are also like erratic at times. We know that what they do when we do something, and we are not very nice to them as well. So how do you how do you see this new environment where M&As are discouraged and the big tech is being, their arm is getting twisted? Just last week the news was that FTC wants to go after Nvidia now, right? I mean, like,
Mhm.
Nvidia, like, what did they do? So
Right.
um uh, and does, I mean, my question is, does that do a disservice to the greater community or to the consuming, from the consumer end, from the enterprise end, because you are letting the small operators operate and without having economies of scale? Then the prices of those items will go up, and the solutions are not cohesive, and you don't let a big player serve with the wide variety of sort of, feature set, if you
Mm.
will, which is easier to operate and cheaper to procure. So there's a sort of dichotomy of this approach. Like, you don't want few vendors to get too big, but at the same time you want to keep the cost down for the
Right.
buyers.
Yeah, so it really is about dominance, right? It's about, because when a company is in the government's mind too dominant, they're going to have a level of pricing power that could be um, painful and could hurt open economics and free market economics. And so I'm not surprised to hear the concerns about Nvidia. I think this is a very, very natural ebb and flow. I think that as we see competitive products coming into the market, as we see the things that AMD and Intel do around trying to develop markets, market development funds, getting people interested in these platforms, I think you'll see that will ebb and flow. And I'm not trying to discount it in any way, but I just think that right now AI and by the way, you're also going to see that over the course of the next couple of years, yes, we're going to have an infrastructure upgrade, but I think customers are going to be harder and harder and hard. Customers are going to be hard pressed to prove the benefits of generative AI and to prove that generative AI is something that they are getting significant productivity gains from. And I think that will likely create more of a cooling effect on this nonlinear growth that we're seeing in the marketplace. I don't think governments are going at these companies and basically saying, you're bad, we want to take you down, or we don't want to, we're concerned about what they're concerned about is pricing power and market dominance. And whenever they see that in the marketplace, there's always those kinds of suspicions. I actually think in the case of an Nvidia, we'll see. I think we're pretty. I don't think we're there yet in
Yeah,
terms of that for generative AI.
yeah,
But
where
again, governments, they don't always get it right. I mean, you think about it. The government, forced the breakup of AT&T. They broke up AT&T, and what did we do? We got all the baby bells, and then we rolled them back, and they all kind of merged back together in the wireless. I mean, governments don't always get it right, but a lot of times they do. So,
yeah, yeah. No, I agree, actually. Yeah. So towards the end here, like, the enterprise challenges and their opportunities, like, I think we mostly talked about it. If you want to add anything there, like,
yeah.
the use of Gen AI versus, like, the Cloud 2.0 or Cloud 3.0,
Yeah.
in what we
Yeah, I
sometimes
think
of.
I think I think the next few years are
Mhm.
are are, are going to be about identifying those business areas where generative AI can have a significant impact. And I think that everybody kind of goes to software development in the tech world, and I think that's a very logical place to go. We talked about that, but you look at some of the other areas that we see that people are super interested in using generative AI. You don't, they're just sort of invisible in plain sight. Product development,
Mhm.
product design. It's a really fun game if you haven't done it. You go on ChatGPT and you say, design, tell me what a next generation Tesla will look like, and it'll actually give you a picture. It's pretty fun, and basically, but basically, companies thinking about how do I use generative AI to think about product design or new use cases or early prototyping of things that I've already developed. Obviously, we hear about it all the time. I think a very, very large market is going to be customer engagement, call centers. This is where we're going to see massive productivity gains. We're going to see a scalability. And I think this is the part about Gen AI that people aren't thinking about, is that if my data is organized, and if I can start to codify the use cases of how I want to use Gen AI in my organization, I can find scale in businesses where historically it's been very, very difficult to find scale. You look at things like professional services businesses. If I can make my executives more productive, I can grow my business. I can grow my business much more profitably than I've been able to do in the past. So I think those kinds of businesses are super valuable. I think we're just beginning to use generative AI in things like marketing. We've been using it in PR, writing press releases and those kinds of things, but now we're starting to get into, help me with marketing messages, help me hone my marketing message, help me, again, these are just really simple examples, but they're incredibly powerful. Yeah. Here's a social tile that worked really, really well. Give me 40 or 50 more based on data that I have in my database or features that I have from my product. And this is the stuff that it doesn't replace marketing. It makes marketing massively more effective than marketing was in the past. Again, we're not seeing it in HR. We're just starting on products like Workday to be able to say, hey, would this kind of a candidate be successful in this role based on the performance reviews of the last 20 people with skills like that, just as an initial screen. And so, these are all areas that come to the top of our list of areas where people are interested in using and deploying generative AI. And I just think we're just beginning to scratch the surfaces. Now, these things I'm talking to you about, these are all horizontal use cases. You start thinking about the healthcare worker, where the healthcare worker is coming on to a shift in intensive care, and generative AI can give a first pass of the 20 intensive care rooms you're going to be taking care of, which patients are the greatest risk for a terrible event, and which are the lowest risk of the terrible event. And it's not just probability, but it's on the number of calls they've had. It's on the most recent surgery they've had, the kind of surgery they had. Again, it may not be perfect data, but it's an indication to make that person more effective as they begin their workday or their shift. As just one example.
Yeah, the examples are so many out there. The sort of digital twins of the physical world, and then later, and which I want to talk to you about, like, where do you see these things going into the future? I believe that the physicality of the world will come in contact with the virtuality of the world. These things are still virtual, right? So it's like all this text is virtual. The videos we are producing, they're like kind of still software. But at some point, you will give that command to a robot to do something physical, pick up this pallet of bricks and move it there, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, we'll definitely see for the very, very straightforward in things like manufacturing, in things like logistics. You will see very, very, I think very soon you're going to see, and you're already seeing it. You'll see very, very straightforward examples of those kinds of use cases and people adopting technology and people using AI for advanced robotic kinds of applications. I think that I think what's going to take a lot longer than people realize is the merging of worlds, the merging of virtual reality with AI. It's a potentially an incredibly immersive and very, very interesting combination. Unfortunately, it's socially very, very isolating. It's not, it doesn't. People like to be together, and it's a virtual group technology, not a physical group technology. And so I think that until we get to a lot better miniaturization technology, I think that the virtual use cases for generative AI are going to be confined to B2B kinds of applications, where there is no social aspect to it. I'm looking at a jet engine. I need to understand what the wear components look like. That I'm going to put my whatever device on, and I'm going to look at that, and it's going to tell me how products, what the temperature is, how they're wearing, whatever it is. But we're going to be in that mode for a long, I think, for a pretty long time. I think where the biggest example of where robotics are going to meet AI is in driverless cars, right? And there, I think we're very, very close and to being able to have basically full driverless experiences, at least in sort of established. I mean, Rome and Paris and those places will come. Those little side streets that'll come a little bit later. But I think even for a lot of cities in the United States, it's pretty it's coming pretty quickly, and I think that's going to surprise a lot of people, and it's probably going to catch a lot of auto manufacturers off guard.
Yeah, I think, and also some controlled environments, the factory environments, or the mining and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would argue those are B2B controlled environments, and those kind of fall in that same category that we were talking about, even doing maintenance with virtual reality. I mean, those things, those have been in place for a long time, and those are just going to get better and better and better. But take them out of their super controlled environment. And by the way, like, even in those controlled environments, you still need a lot of human oversight. I mean, nobody wants to drill a tunnel in the wrong spot.
Yes, that is so true. And actually, the one area I'm very passionate about is the practitioner economics, and that I put under the systems economics. I think that the enterprise's system economics is a function of vendor economics, practitioner economics, and infrastructure economics, and a few other sort of components, if you will. But the practitioners economics is very important in our domain, in high tech, especially the programmers move jobs a lot more. Actually, I know we don't have much time, but in that context, I think we can cover that some other time.
Yeah.
But I want to hear from you any sort of takeaways from the historic reference point of views, like, hey, do this, don't do that kind of stuff, right? For practitioners of the technology, people who are entering the field, and or people who are mid-career, how they should learn, how fast they should learn, or how should they embrace newer technology.
Yeah. So,
I
mean, in my experience, if you're whatever field you're in, run to technology. Run to technology, be curious about technology, immerse yourself in technology. The worst thing you can do from a career standpoint is ignore it, pretend it's not there, dismiss it, because technology, and you've heard me talk about this before, Sarbjeet. I mean, it's all buried in the GDP numbers, right? It used to be that when GDP would go down, IT spending would collapse. Now we're not seeing that any longer. We're seeing that even when GDP gets weak, technology continues to be strong. And the reason for that is that companies simply cannot cut back on their technology investments going forward. Now, I think that what's changed in the course of the last decade is it used to be become a coder, become a coder, become a coder. No offense, Sergey. No, but I mean, it used to be just, become a coder, learn how to code, and you'll have a great future. Well, it's not that simple. You have to figure out how code can be leveraged in an organization. The days of working and asking and someone saying, here, you work on this part of the code, and that's going to get replaced by generative AI. In the same way that when I started my career, everybody wanted to be an accountant, and those were the first jobs to get offshore, right? Because that is something you could codify and could easily go away. But it would not go away, but not be something that you would pay a lot for here. And so here now, what you need to do is understand that mix of the human experience and coding. And that is where, and technology, and that is where the intersection is incredibly valuable. And you understand those two things, now you're incredibly valuable to an organization. But, I consider myself incredibly blessed to have been around technology for the last 35 years. It's something I'm passionate about. But at the same time, I would say to anyone, you don't have to know every little bit about technology, but don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. the more you embrace it, the more you learn about it, the more you will differentiate yourself, and you'll develop really valuable skills about how people will work, how people will become more productive, how people will delight their customers in new ways by leveraging technology.
I think well said. Actually, great tips there. To the programmers, the likes of me, don't lose hope. There's a big difference between programming and coding. AI,
Absolutely.
Gen AI can do great coding today, but not programming. Programming is when you put things together, when you have the business knowledge, the domain sort of expertise, like how the PO works with the requisitions and what is the ASN, advanced ship notice, in your domain. I'm talking about
Yeah,
B2B e-commerce in this case, but there are so many examples in your domain. So programmers are still needed. So technologies like fashion, we are never done doing it. I mean, never lose the hope that, oh, we
exactly.
already done
Exactly.
this and we can't do anymore. So with that said, Crawford, thank you very much for your valuable
Absolutely.
time you gave us.
I hope you had I enjoyed myself. Thank you for having me.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.